This is a 1985.5 Porsche 944, and today I'm going to show you some of its unique features and all the surprises I found while servicing it. This 944 is painted in graphite metallic with a black interior. Graphite metallic was a special color option available in 1985 and 1986, and it almost looks black under certain lighting conditions, but it's actually more of a charcoal color with some metallic flake in it. This car was the unfortunate victim of an engine fire at some point in its past, and the engine has reportedly been replaced to bring the car back to life. But aside from a few singed components that I'll highlight in a minute, the car is in really nice condition overall. There's very little oxidation in the engine compartment, and the interior looks amazing with only 71,000 miles on the odometer. The current owner brought this car in for a clutch replacement, a water pump, and timing belt replacement, along with some other things. Anytime you're working on a 944, you should expect at least a few surprises as you start digging into the maintenance, and there certainly have been some interesting ones here, so let's get into it. As I said, this is a later 944, part of the model year refresh in 1985, where it received an updated interior and a number of design changes over the earlier cars. One of those changes moved the fuel line routing directly over the exhaust manifold. Here we've got some aftermarket braided lines installed, but as the OEM rubber lines harden and age, they eventually crack and leak fuel, which can result in catastrophic engine fires. In this case, it looks like the fire was extinguished relatively quickly, but there's still some evidence that remains. On the exterior, we can see a few spots on the hood where the fire literally cooked the paint from below, the worst spot being in the center here where the clear coat has melted away, but it certainly could have been a lot worse. Under the hood, we can see that the hood insulation has been burned or scraped off, and someone has spray painted it in a few places. There's some overspray on the warning label at the base of the hood panel. In the engine compartment, the brake fluid reservoir is also a little toasted around the edges. There's been some work done to the wiring harness back here where there's some new wire loom added, and the connectors for the speed and reference sensors are a little melted. But other than that, everything else has either been replaced or was undamaged in the fire, which is pretty interesting. Another interesting detail here is that this car still has its original plastic battery cover in place, something that often gets lost or discarded over the years. You'll also notice that the windshield glass has been cracked by the hood, where the back left corner contacts the glass when the hood is raised. When you look at the hinge connection points, you can see where the panel's been shifted back from its original factory position, bringing it closer to the glass, which ultimately caused the damage. One last unique feature on the outside here is the addition of a Saratoga top, which is an aftermarket glass roof panel, a desirable accessory that's become harder to find in recent years. Moving on to some of the engine work, I encountered a few surprises while breaking down the front of the engine to replace the water pump. After setting the engine to top dead center, I confirmed the timing marks for the camshaft and balance shafts were set correctly, which is great to see. However, the balance shaft belt was set way too tight, to the point where I could barely twist it 45 degrees. It didn't appear that anything was damaged as a result, but over time it would have put undue stress on the balance shaft bearings. Next, I noticed the timing belt tensioner was tensioned in a clockwise direction rather than the counterclockwise as it should have been set. This is something that I see from time to time, so I wasn't too surprised there. But as we look a little bit closer, we can see that this has the updated water pump design that added a guide plate for the timing belt, and the rear belt cover modification was done incorrectly. There were some holes drilled for the guide plate studs where instead larger sections of the cover should have been removed. As a result, the timing belt idler roller started cutting a hole in the belt cover and eventually stopped spinning altogether, which created a flat spot on the roller while it shaved material away from the belt surface. This would have been very bad news for the engine, so lucky we caught it early enough to get it corrected, and of course the rear cover has now been modified using the printable templates from the Porsche TSB, with the appropriate area removed. While I was here, I found some minor oil leaks from the balance shaft seals and the front crankshaft seal, so in went some new shaft seals and O-rings to get things sealed up. Next up was the water pump, and after removing it from the engine block, you can see that silicone RTV was used in place of the OEM paper gasket, which can work, but it makes cleanup a little bit more difficult. After scraping off all the old sealant with a plastic scraper and scouring pad, I discovered the aluminum mating surface had previously been cleaned with a rotary tool, which is never a great idea. You can see all kinds of scratches and swirl marks left behind by a wire wheel or a sanding element. This can create high spots and low spots in the surface, and some of the outer edges were slightly rounded down, but fortunately I was able to get a good seal on the new pump once it was torqued down. It's a good idea to check the installation at this point with a coolant pressure tester, which I did by adding 10 psi to the system. While the pump seal was good, my next discovery was a coolant leak at the upper radiator hose connection. This one was a quick fix by simply tightening down the ring clamp. While I was here, I noticed that one of the bushing mounts for the radiator had fallen out and gotten wedged between two coolant lines, so I made sure to reinstall it at the top of the radiator. As I prepared to bleed the coolant system, the engine struggled to start as it had been sitting for a while, and it misfired for about a minute after it finally started, so I pulled the fuel injectors and it was pretty clear that two of them were partially clogged. I was surprised to find that a set of aftermarket injectors were installed here, so I replaced these with a pre-owned set of OEM Bosch injectors that had been freshly rebuilt by RC Fuel Injection. With the new injectors installed, the engine started right up and was running well, but I now noticed that the charging system wasn't working and the battery warning indicator wouldn't illuminate when the ignition was in the on position. I was hoping this was simply a bad light bulb that could be replaced, as it's a required piece of the excitation circuit to initiate the alternator. So out came the gauge cluster, where I discovered that the original bulbs had been replaced with some LEDs. This LED tested good, but the copper contacts for the bulb were slightly deformed and peeling away from the assembly. Further inspection revealed that the ribbon circuit was separating in some places, and one circuit trace was completely burned up, so time for a rebuild or replacement of this cluster, which the customer deferred to a later time. Back behind the alternator, you'll find a larger lead for the charging circuit that goes down to the starter and then back up to the battery positive terminal. The smaller terminal here is part of the excitation circuit, where the blue wire goes up to the fuse panel and back to the gauge cluster, which is faulty in this case. Fortunately, the alternator will typically self-excite when the engine is revved past 2 or 3,000 RPM, provided the voltage regulator is healthy, the battery has a decent charge, and the car hasn't been sitting unused for a long period of time. Here you can see when the engine is revved at cold start, the voltage will jump from about 12 volts, where it's not charging, up to 14 volts, where it starts charging, which initiates the alternator and will allow the customer to drive the car home. The customer also requested a new steering rack to replace the leaking one, along with a power steering pump rebuild with all new seals. No big surprises here, but I did find that the power steering system had been filled with conventional power steering fluid rather than the recommended Dextron ATF, which is a bright red coloring. So I flushed the system and added some Dextron for the best performance and longevity of the new components. While I was replacing the leaking AC compressor on the car, I noticed the alternator air duct was missing, and there was an earlier 4-ribbed belt installed in place of the later 5-rib belt that should have been here. So I added in the correct accessory belt, a new air duct, and 2 ring clamps for proper cooling of the alternator. As I moved on to the clutch replacement work, there were a few more unexpected discoveries, one being that the clutch pedal was periodically dropping to the floor and had to be pulled back up. I was hoping this was just a little air trapped in the hydraulic system, but after connecting the power bleeder, adding 10 psi, and opening the bleeder valve, no fluid was passing through the slave cylinder, even after I completely removed the valve. I loosened the supply line to the cylinder and fluid was flowing, so in went a new slave cylinder, easily replaced with the starter removed. After bleeding the new slave cylinder, the clutch pedal was still dropping, so in went a new master cylinder. This one's a little more hidden away down below the brake booster, but is fairly accessible with some of the evap equipment out of the way. Another surprise here was that the soft fluid line from the reservoir was affixed with plastic zip ties instead of the appropriate clamps, so I added some new ring clamps, bled the system again, and finally a working clutch pedal. While removing the transmission to access the clutch assembly, I noticed that the shift rod seal was seeping some gear oil. This was well timed for replacement since we plan to install a short shifter in place of the factory shift linkage anyway, both of which were a lot easier to do with the transmission out of the car. With the old clutch assembly removed, you can see that the rubber center clutch disc has completely crumbled and broken apart. No big surprise there based upon the clunking noises that were coming from the driveline, but definitely something to watch out for if you have a base model 944 with an original clutch installed. I also found some oil seepage around the rear crankshaft seal, which I already planned to replace, so in went a new seal and a new pilot bearing. The flywheel was in pretty good shape, but I went ahead and had it resurfaced so it'd be nice and fresh, and finally installed the new spring center clutch assembly. As for the interior, I didn't find too many surprises other than its outstanding overall condition. The dashboard is super clean with only a few small cracks around the defrost vents, and the front seat leather is still very soft and pliable. You'll notice this car has a newer Blaupunkt Bremen SQR46 radio installed, which is a retro design that offers some modernization with Bluetooth and media inputs. I also found an original factory floor mat on the passenger side, pretty cool to see, and finally the cassette tape storage lid has been recovered with some perforated leather material inside and out. Well, that concludes the overview of this 1985.5 Porsche 944 and some of the surprises I found along the way. I'm sure there'll be a few more surprises in store for the owner as it starts to get driven a bit more, but for now it's all wrapped up and on its way home.